portrait moment. As the Bidens and Obamas share a White House reunion, could a meeting of two superpower leaders spoil the glow? Poison pill. Learn more about a Catholic pharmacist's fight to defend conscious protections after her termination. Spiritual awakenings. How prominent entertainers may be finding a new love of Christianity. And practicing discernment. Pope Francis teaches how to recognize God in life's unexpected moments. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, September 7th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this Feast of St. Cloud. I'm Tracy Sabol. The Biden administration is facing serious challenges popping up across the globe. Russia and China plan a high-stakes meeting while Iran launches new cyber attacks. It all comes as the U.S. battles ongoing inflation at home. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, the upcoming meeting between Russia and China could draw those two countries closer together, posing a setback for the United States, which wants to isolate Russia for its invasion of Ukraine.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping plan a face-to-face meeting for the first time since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The two U.S. adversaries and competitors will gather at a summit taking place this month in Uzbekistan. President Putin already meeting today with the chairman of China's National People's Congress seeks outside support.
We are choking off Russia's military supply chains. For example, Russia has to rely on North Korea, as you all heard, and Iran for military equipment.
Iran, another country causing concern. The U.S. now blames the Islamic Republic for a cyber attack against Albania. Albania says it will cut diplomatic ties with Iran. The U.S. National Security Council calls the cyber attack reckless and irresponsible and says Iran is responsible for subsequent hack and leak operations. All this while natural disasters continue to wreak havoc. A new report shows Somalia is facing its worst drought in 70 years. The U.S. says it's committed over $700 million this year to help avoid widespread famine and says it is imperative that the international community acts immediately in order to save lives. Back at the White House today, a celebration.
Barack and Michelle, welcome home.
The Bidens welcome the Obamas for their official portrait unveiling.
What I want people to remember about Michelle and me is that presidents and first ladies are human beings like everyone else. We have our gifts, we have our flaws.
Now, one more note on Somalia. The U.S. says the Horn of Africa region has yet to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine has increased the cost of food, fuel, and fertilizer, making assistance more expensive. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, a judge in Michigan has struck down a pro-life law months after suspending it. The decision comes as the state's Supreme Court is still considering whether to place an abortion-related proposal on November's ballot. While Massachusetts held primary elections yesterday, Jeff Deal won his bid to become the Republican nominee for governor. The former state representative has the endorsement of former President Donald Trump. He faces the current Attorney General, Maura Healey, in the heavily Democratic state. Deal lost a bid in 2018 to unseat Senator Elizabeth Warren. Russia bombed targets in Ukraine today with rockets and artillery. An apartment building in one eastern city received a direct hit. Firefighters searched for victims. Shelling also resumed near Ukraine's damaged nuclear plant, where the UN Atomic Agency is seeking a safe zone. Liz Truss addressed Parliament today for the first time as the United Kingdom's new Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm honoured to take my place as Prime Minister in this House and to take on responsibility at a vital time for our country. I am determined to deliver for everybody across our United Kingdom.
In her new role, she says the nation's energy crisis is her top priority and plans to announce new initiatives tomorrow. Colombia's President Gustavo Petro attended a funeral yesterday for 7 police officers recently killed in an ambush. Authorities have not identified those responsible. 1 police officer survived. The deaths marked the first major violence since Petro took office last month. Also in Colombia, the faithful are praying that a Catholic chapel at Bogota International Airport will reopen. Last month, a private management company closed it and told the local diocese to remove all statues and liturgical items so the space can become neutral for all religions. And you can read more about this story, plus a new report about stolen consecrated hosts from Bogota's cathedral by visiting our online partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Diplomats from the U.S., South Korea, and Japan are reaffirming a security partnership in case North Korea conducts a nuclear test.
Our goal remains the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We remain committed to seeking dialogue with the DPRK and are prepared to meet without preconditions. The U.S. places great importance on trilateral coordination and will continue to cooperate closely at all levels as we together pursue our shared goal of denuclearization.
The ministers met in Tokyo today to discuss both deterrence and possible responses toward Pyongyang. Coming up, a Catholic pharmacist fights for conscience protections after a job termination. Plus, exploring whether possible conversions by 2 celebrities suggest a trend towards spiritual awakenings. The Senate in South Carolina has begun to debate an abortion ban that would exclude exceptions for pregnancies caused by rape or incest. An initial vote to restore exceptions failed. No Democrats voted in an attempt to pressure divided Republicans. South Carolina's House already passed a version of the bill, which includes exceptions up to the 12th week of pregnancy. Well, a nurse practitioner has filed a lawsuit against pharmacy giant CVS. She says that she was fired because of her pro-life views. A suit was filed in Northern Virginia. In it, the Catholic employee says that she was fired for refusing to provide abortion-inducing drugs. She says the pharmacy chain had granted her a religious exemption for years, but last year, the company changed its policy. CVS says it tries to accommodate religious beliefs, but adds, quote, sexual health services are an essential part of the job. We go now to the lawyer representing the Catholic pro-life employee, Kevin Terrio, with Alliance Defending Freedom. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. As we mentioned, your client says that CVS had granted her a religious exemption for years. Why did that policy change? And also, can you talk to us about the timing of your client's firing?
Sure, that policy changed because CVS created a problem where there was not one. Mrs. Casey had a spotless record. They accommodated her for 3.5 years, and they never had any issues at all. And so instead of going forward with that accommodation, they decided to violate her rights by firing her.
Yeah, and have you heard from CVS? Have they responded?
We have not heard from CVS. We're still in the early stages of of filing the lawsuit. Of course, the lawsuit essentially says that CVS and other major corporations can't fire someone who wants to work according to their beliefs.
Yeah, and what is, the timetable for this lawsuit? What comes next?
So the next step is that CVS will have to respond officially to the lawsuit. And it'll be interesting to see what they say, because Virginia law is pretty clear that major corporations like CVS can't fire someone who wants to work according to their beliefs. And that's especially true in this time when healthcare workers are at a shortage. We need all that we can get.
Yeah, and I'm curious, how's your client doing now? Paige Casey, I believe her name is, right? And how has this termination impacted her financially and personally?
It's really affected her. I mean, their family relied upon that. They have a young toddler, and they relied upon that income to make sure that he got his needs taken care of. And it's been very difficult to replace that income and find similar work.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And Kevin, I'm wondering, before I let you go, are there any other religious freedom cases that you or ADF is following right now that might be of interest to our viewers?
Certainly. I mean, we have multiple cases across the country where people are being compelled to work or forced to violate their religious convictions in order to maintain their jobs. As a matter of fact, we just won a case in California on assisted suicide where the state of California was requiring doctors to refer for physician-assisted suicide. And the court entered a preliminary injunction on that on Friday, recognizing that the First Amendment protects the rights of workers who don't want to be involved in something that violates their conscience.
Well, Kevin, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us today about all this. We really appreciate it.
You're certainly welcome. We really appreciate you having us on.
Well, a report from the CDC indicates Americans suffered mentally as well as physically from COVID-19. It says that 22% of U.S. adults received psychiatric treatment in 2021, an increase of 3% from 2019. The report also found that women were more likely than men to seek help. The findings come from the National Center for Health Statistics. Well, a world-famous recording artist released a music video last week for a song with several references to faith and God. Use This Gospel by Eminem includes the lines, "Armed with Jesus, my weapon is prayer." That one well-known Catholic commentator took notice. The Daily Wire's Michael Knowles wrote on social media, quote, "We are living in an age of great spiritual renewal. It doesn't always feel like it, but I am convinced it's happening." And Michael Knowles, who is with the Daily Wire and host of the Michael Knowles Show, joins us now. Michael, welcome back. Great to see you again, as always. Your tweet about spiritual awakenings, it really caught our attention. Can you talk to us more about why you believe we are in a time of spiritual renewal right now?
Well, I can't say that Eminem is my favorite artist of all time. I can't say that I'm totally familiar with hip-hop music and that I listen to it regularly. But this song really caught my ear because I think that it is as much a sign of the times as it is a confession by Eminem. I have no reason not to believe that Eminem is sincere in describing the gospel as his sort of weapon, in describing the sort of intense spiritual combat that he finds himself in. It's worth noting, I think, also that the language that Eminem is using here is not the kind of language of this wishy-washy, milquetoast, kind of sappy 1970s popular hymns. No, he's using language that is really quite intense and traditional. I think it's actually the same sort of impulse that leads young people and young converts and reverts to the faith more to seek the sobriety and reverence and seriousness of something like the traditional Latin Mass more than, say, the kind of 1970s pop songs that are so popular in the Mass of Pope Paul VI. You know, the young people who are drawn back to the faith, they want orthodoxy. They don't want soft soap and wishful thinking. They want the truth. They want the truth unvarnished, and they understand that we are in a spiritual combat. That is what so often leads us back to God. And so I think Eminem is channeling that, and I think that he's very likely sincere in what he's rapping about. But even if he weren't, I think the very fact that such a popular artist as Eminem, or a popular artist like Kanye or any of these other people, the very fact that they are singing and rapping to these sorts of themes tells you that at the very least, these are good businessmen who realize that there is a market out there because there is a deep spiritual yearning as we come out of the malaise of the last 20 years of that ridiculous new atheist movement and the kind of silly, shallow materialism and the bizarre new agey Gnosticism that we've all been subjected to. I think there is a very sincere yearning for people for the truth, for orthodoxy, for the real gospel, and that's because man is fundamentally a religious being. We've had that God-shaped hole in our heart for a very long time, and to deny it, as the culture has tried to do, there is ultimately no way to deny that. As the million people in Poland chanted when Pope John Paul II showed up in the very final days of Soviet communism, "We want God."
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned Eminem and you mentioned Kanye West. Are there any other famous or maybe perhaps unexpected people who are recently professing an interest in faith or God?
There are many, and I think a lot of them aren't even major celebrities, though you have seen this turn. I mean, Kanye West is probably the most important pop star in the world right now, and Kanye West had a very public sort of conversion or reversion to Christianity. But I think more often it's people who do not grab the headlines, but who we've experienced in our own lives. I mean, just anecdotally, there are so many people, friends of mine, family members, who have expressed an interest in maybe going back to church, maybe picking up their Bible, people that you would have never guessed in a million years. And I mention this on TV because I know that probably most, if not everyone who is watching right now, has a similar experience. And the reason I mention the more traditional sort of liturgies, too, is because I can't help but notice I travel all around the country speaking at universities and different sorts of events. And I can't help but notice when I'm traveling and I go to a church, the ones that are really packed to the gills tend to be the more traditional and reverent churches. And they're packed to the gills usually with younger people. You know, when I go to a traditional parish, very often the median age is 25, and somehow they all still have something like 12 children. I don't even know how that's biologically possible. But it's people who are taking the faith seriously in a way that I think we've seen a neglect of that for maybe half a century now. Well, I think the age of Aquarius is over. I think the days of the hippies are waning, and I think we're finally seeing a return to truth.
Yeah, and Michael, we have probably about a minute left or so, but you mentioned speaking at universities, that is, and I want to talk about something I understand there are some new developments regarding a Catholic college that actually disinvited you from speaking on campus last spring. Can you talk to us more about that and that situation?
Yes, this was a student group at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. They wanted to invite me to come give a talk, and the university rejected that invitation and disinvited me from coming. And the irony, of course, is not only that the university allegedly has a free speech policy to allow all sorts of ideas on campus, but the real irony is they disinvited me specifically because I espouse Catholic beliefs. So because I reject the ideology of transgenderism, and I hold, as does the book of Genesis in the very first chapters, as does the Holy Catholic Church, that God created man, male and female, and men and women are different. Because I espouse that view, that was why they disinvited me. So it would seem to me that the University of St. Thomas only pretends to be Catholic, and that when Catholicism comes into conflict with leftism, the University of St. Thomas goes with its true religion, leftism.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Michael, always great to speak with you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, why Pope Francis is praising a group bringing hospitals to a war-torn nation. Plus, the Holy Father teaches how discernment is essential in our journey of life. The Holy See has announced that Archbishop Valdemar Stanislav Sommertak will become the nuncio serving 4 nations along the West African coast. He previously held the same post in Nicaragua before the government of Daniel Ortega expelled him last March. Pope Francis praises the work of a group operating more than 6 health facilities in war-torn Syria. The Holy Father met recently with workers from the Open Hospitals Initiative, which is sponsored primarily by the Vatican and the AVS Foundation. In his message, the Holy Father said the Catholic Church should always be a place with open doors and one that welcomes interreligious coexistence. Syria is in the midst of a war that has lasted more than a decade. We go now to Gianpaolo Silvestri, Secretary General of the AVSI Foundation. Mr. Secretary General, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about this audience with the Holy Father? What part of his message was most meaningful to you?
Yes. In this audience, the Holy Father, this audience was linked to the event about the project Open Hospital in Syria. In his speech, the Holy Father gave us some message. The first is not to forget Syrian crisis, because now Syrian crisis is not in the homepage of the media newspaper, but the situation is very bad. The population below the poverty line is 90% of the total population. Half of the health system is completely destroyed, and are necessary resources, funds, and projects to help the Syrian population, the IDPs, and the refugees in the countries like Lebanon and Jordan.
And before the audience with Pope Francis, I understand that there was a press conference with Cardinal Zanari, Apostolic Nuncio to Syria. Can you tell us about this project, Open Hospitals, and the work and how the Vatican is helping?
Yes, this project, Open Hospital, was promoted by the Cardinal Mario Zanari in 2017, considering the health system in Syria that half of this system was destroyed. And the idea is to use these 3 Catholic hospitals, 2 in Damascus, 1 in Aleppo, and to open this hospital to all the population and to provide care treatments free of charge for the whole population. Through this project, ABSI, in cooperation with the 3 hospitals, provide until now 80,000 treatments to poor population in Syria. The plan is to continue until 2024 and to reach 140,000 patients in Syria with care treatments for different kind of needs. This is the core of the project. The project was supported by many Bishop Conference, US Bishop Conference, Italian Bishop Conference, and many private Catholic foundations, and also some bilateral cooperations like Italian government and Hungarian governments.
We're almost out of time, but before I let you go, I know your foundation carries out humanitarian aid projects in more than 30 countries. What other initiatives are you working on at this time?
Yes, we work in 39 countries, but there are some countries, some crises in which we are very involved. The main are Haiti. Haiti is a very difficult situation. We can consider Haiti as a failed state. The institution, the public institution, has completely destroyed. There are some parts of the country that are controlled by criminal groups, and there is not a possibility to work, to travel around the country, the cities. And the population, we can say that 90% of the population is below under the poverty line. This is one of the main countries and main crises in which we work, and the other is the Ukrainian crisis. We work inside Ukraine with many projects, especially of food distribution in some area like Sumy, Poltava, Kharkiv, to provide food and protection services for the children in this area.
Mr. Secretary General, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We appreciate it. God bless you. Finally tonight, Pope Francis reminds the faithful that there is a way to recognize God in our normal daily routine.
Dio lavora attraverso eventi non programmabili.
At his weekly talk to pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father said God sometimes speaks to us even in the unexpected moments of our life. When we encounter a surprise event, if we react with our hearts and with kindness, we will ensure the response is coming from God. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.